I'm Andrew Schwartz, and you're listening to The Truth of the Matter, a podcast by CSIS where we break down the top policy issues of the day and talk with the people that can help us best understand what's really going on. This is a emergency episode of the Trade Guys, and the only Trade Guys are here are me and Bill. Scott is out on family time, which is great for Scott. We're very, very happy for him. And Phil is in Australia. So, Bill, it's going to be you and me chopping up Trade Guys today. You know, this is unprecedented to have just me and you without the other Trade Guys. But I'm very excited to talk to you today because this is a big, big deal. Yesterday, Wednesday, April 2nd, was apparently called Liberation Day by President Trump. Today, the headlines are, it's a blow to the world economy. What's happening here, Bill?
Well, it certainly was a big day, and it's going to be a blow to the world economy. The WTO has already said this is going to be a blow to world trade, and there's going to be a lot of impact. Shameless plug here. We'll later today be coming out with a paper on all of this.
So we're talking on the 3rd, so it'll be on CSIS.org by end of business today, which is, 5, 6 o'clock Eastern.
And we've done some economic modeling and are predicting 1% reduction in U.S. GDP, which is a lot, 9.5% rise in prices, and an 8.6% rise in nominal wages due to the inflation, which means, in effect, lower real wages because prices are rising faster than
because they're not keeping in pace with inflation.
Yeah, you're right, exactly. And we also note that these effects are going to be highly regressive. In other words, the tariffs are going to be paid largely by poor, middle class, and lower income people. And the irony of that is the revenue that accrues from the tariffs is going to be used for Trump's tax cuts, which accrue primarily to rich people. So this is going to be a giant income transfer, which I don't think was the purpose, but that's the effect of it. It's going to be enormously disruptive to the trading system. Maybe we should say a word, though, first about what it is that he did.
Yeah, and what is it he did? Because, we're talking about an enormous transfer of wealth to the wealthy. This is supposed to ostensibly benefit the American worker. What did he actually do?
Yes, well, if you've been on Mars and don't know, what he did was impose a 10% tariff on everybody and everything. And then, in addition to that, for about 60 countries, he had a different tariff that was greater than 10%. And the highest one was 50%, which I think was Lesotho. And China was 34%. The Japan tariff is 25%. The Indian tariff is 27%. So that's not in addition to 10. It's instead of 10. But they're big numbers, and they're skewed against primarily Asian countries who got hit the hardest. A number of African countries, although not all of them. Cambodia was 49%. Vietnam was 46%. Lesotho, as I said, was 50%. Latin America got off relatively lightly. The European Union is 20%. They're sort of in the middle.
And Bill, let me ask you, a lot of people were surprised that there weren't additional tariffs put on Mexico and Canada. Isn't that right?
Yes, I was just getting to that. They got off easy, at least for the time being. Basically, it's the status quo for them, which means that if their imports are USMCA compliant, it's still zero. And now, if they're not USMCA compliant, it's 25, which is what has been for the last several weeks. And there is a provision in yesterday's order that says if the emergency with respect to Canada and Mexico were to go away, in other words, if the arrangement I just discussed were to go away, then the tariff for non-USMCA compliant imports would be reduced to 12%. So still a good deal compared to a lot of other countries. Then there are other exceptions. So left out of the whole mix are steel, aluminum, and autos, because those are all 25%. And those are not 25% in addition to the country numbers. They're just 25%. So if you're importing a Japanese car, it won't be 25% plus 25%. It'll be 25% period.
Which is still a lot.
It's enormous, but it's not additive in this case.
So just to put this in perspective, let's say you get a $50,000 Toyota or Honda. 25% means you're going to pay not $10,000 more, but $25,000 more, correct?
No, $12,500 for a 25% tariff.
$12,500. Okay. That's a lot of money to anybody.
Yes. And actually, it will be on top of, in addition to the 2.5%, the existing MFN tariff, which is also still there. So it'll be a little bit more. So instead of your $50,000 car, it would cost $63,500 or something like that. So that's huge. And The worst one, I shouldn't say the worst one, the hardest hit one is China, because the 34% is also going to be on top of the 20% that Trump imposed in February.
So it's really 54%.
It's really 54. And then if you throw in the 301 tariffs left over from Trump 1.0, which is not on everything, but on some things, for a lot of goods from China, the tariff is going to be pushing 75, 80%, which is going to be trade prohibitive.
Let's bring it down to a product that, isn't a car, but something, many, many Americans use, the iPhone. iPhones are made in China. So an iPhone that costs $1,000, I'm hearing today on CNBC and others, what does that mean? It's going to cost $1,500?
Yes, more than that.
More.
If it's made in China. Now, one of the things that Apple's been doing is moving production to Vietnam and India, which doesn't get them off the hook.
No, because as you just said, both of those countries have big tariffs too.
Vietnam number is 46%, yes, but it'll be cheaper than China. So yes, if you're getting an Apple from China, your $1,000 phone is going to be more than $1,500.
So Bill, one of the lasting things that I've really learned from, doing this show with you, Trade Guys, is that it's not so easy to flip the switch on and flip the switch off. And President Trump, a lot of his advisors, a lot of his people are talking about how, this is laying the groundwork for negotiation to get more fairness into, the trading system. It seems like this is going to inflict an awful lot of pain on Americans. This morning, again, I heard on CNBC, and I've seen this in the Wall Street Journal and many other financial publications, that the effect of this is lower employment for Americans. It's higher inflation, higher prices for Americans. And it's also going to really slow our growth. We were growing at 3%. Now we're growing at 0.2%. And we're on the precipice of a recession. So how is this benefiting us?
Well, I think my answer to that is it's not. It's going to make everything worse. The Trump answer is there's going to be a short-term disruption. But in the long term, more manufacturing will come here and everybody will be happier, which misses several points, one of which is the important one is the one you made, which is the time gap. These things don't happen overnight. So even if companies do move here, and Trump has repeatedly said, if you want to avoid the tariff, make it here. But, making it here means you've got to build or acquire or expand a factory here. And that's not a decision that gets made overnight. And even if you make it in a week, it doesn't get built overnight. There's a current case, Stellantis, which, is the new name for Chrysler and Jeep, announced that they were retooling and reopening a plant in Illinois. And they announced this, I think, late last year. And the open date is 2027.
Yeah, so you're talking years.
Yes, and that's not even building a new plant. That's just retooling an old one.
Mm-hmm.
So people are going to be paying, the cost comes long before any benefit. And the other question that is going to be raised increasingly is whether there really will be the benefit that he's talking about. Because if you're a CEO thinking about this, you're being told, well, if you build it here, you're not going to pay the tariff. But you're also thinking, well, Trump's in for 4 years. How long are these tariffs going to last? Is he going to change his mind in 3 weeks? Is he going to change his mind in 6 months? Countries are lining up trying to beg for mercy to get breaks or deals from their particular country. And we can talk about this in a minute. The administration sent mixed signals on that. But if you're a CEO, you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe the thing I should do is hold on and see what happens. Maybe my government will bail me out. And even if they don't, it might be smarter for me to just ride this out for 4 years on the assumption that the next person is going to get rid of all this. Why would I want to make a $3 billion factory investment in the United States if the financial incentives to do that or the economic incentives to do that are going to disappear after 4 years? So I think you're going to see a lot of waiting and people holding on to their wallets.
And, Bill, as far as American companies, I guess a lot of them, they're going to be deeply affected by this, including our farmers, by the way. They're going to count on tax credits and subsidies from the administration. That's an awful lot to count on, especially given what J.D. Vance said this morning on Fox News. He said that the Americans are going to have to, suck it up and wait it out. And it's going to be some time before Americans will see benefits of this Trump plan.
Well, this will be a test of their patience, because it may be quite a while before they see the benefits.
If there are any benefits, correct?
Well, yes, right.
That's still in question.
And you can anticipate the losers. Farmers usually are the biggest losers, not because of our tariffs, but because of the retaliation.
Sure.
And it's too soon to say whether there's going to be retaliation.
Well, and that's what we're all waiting with bated breath. Is there going to be massive retaliation? And by the way, The other factor here is, last weekend, China met with Korea and with Japan, and they could forge a trade alliance without us.
They could. I'm skeptical, but that particular discussion has been going on for like 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not holding my breath. But what we are seeing are companies, foreign companies, saying, and countries too, saying, well, the U.S. is no longer a reliable partner, and maybe it's time for us to look to other markets. This, most interestingly, has appeared first in the defense market. So you've now had two countries, Portugal and Canada, announce that they're reevaluating their decisions to purchase the F-35 fighter because they are not sure that the United States is a reliable partner. Because Trump, in a White House interview a couple of weeks ago, famously said, well, maybe we should sell them reduced versions of the plane because someday they may not be our allies anymore, and we don't want them to have equivalent stuff. If you're Portugal or Canada or other European nations, that's got to make you stop and think. I mean, are these really the people that we can count on in the future for a responsible, mature economic relationship? So they're going to start going elsewhere. You're right. Japan, Korea, and China are starting to talk. It'll be interesting to see what the Europeans say to the Chinese. It'll be interesting to see how developing countries who've been hit with high numbers, how they change their plans and look more to other countries in the developed world. Southeast Asia, I would expect pattern shifts here, probably in the direction of the Middle East and Europe. Some of that was, I think, happening anyway, but you're probably going to see more of that. And it's going to be complicated for American exporters, even if there's not tariff retaliation. There's a reliability issue. What hurt the farmers was basically the China in the last time was basically the Chinese government decided to buy soybeans from Brazil. That was partly a price issue, but it was also a message issue. And it was a statement that we, the Chinese, don't consider the United States a reliable source anymore. And that's going to put, basically exporters are going to have one hand tied behind their back if they try to export. Countries are going to say, how do we know you can deliver? And how do we know you can deliver on a sustained basis? Maybe I'll make a one-off purchase, but if I'm going to buy American cars and start a dealership and make an investment, how do I know that, next week there's not going to be some retaliation or Trump isn't going to do something strange that's going to cripple all this? A lot of thinking is going to have to go on. And while people are thinking about all of that, they're going to be waiting.
Bill, people around the world are saying that Trump has, with his actions yesterday, he's created a new world order, one that we haven't had since before World War I. The other thing that I'm hearing, despite, in addition to all the uncertainty, the panic on Wall Street, the drop in, the precipitous drop of our markets today, that's short term and, okay, we can weather this. But I guess maybe the bigger question is what could the tariffs do to the United States' unmatched influence over the world's financial system, the advantages its businesses enjoy, and a reputation that really attracts investors and innovators?
Well, I'm delighted to see you're ahead of the curve, Andrew, because that's the next thing people are going to be thinking about. And that's going to be not only the effect on the dollar, but also the effect on investors, private and other government investors, and whether they're going to move away from the dollar as a safe currency. It's too soon to say whether that's going to happen, but the dollar as a reserve currency globally, and the fact that I think more than half of the world's financial transactions or trade transactions are conducted in dollars, is a sign of the world's confidence in the stability and reliability and safety of U.S. currency. If they don't have that confidence anymore, they're going to move to euros, to yen, probably not the RMB, but other probably smaller currencies, the Australian dollar, the Canadian dollar, and they're going to be putting their money there. That's going to be a problem for us because we have an enormous debt and we finance that debt through borrowing. And a lot of the borrowing is taken up by foreign investors who buy treasury bonds or treasury bills. And if they stop doing that, or if they cut back on that, uh, interest rates will go up. Our debt service payments will go up, which means our budget deficit will go up. and we will be digging the economic hole even deeper than it already is.
Okay, so we're not sure who benefits from this. We're not sure what's going to happen with the world order. We're not sure what our place in the world order is going to be. I can't understand why they're doing this. Do you?
Well, I know what they've said, and I think actually what they've said is probably the truth. The problem is they've said a lot of things, and it's hard to sort out in any given country which one applies. I think there are sort of four rationales, and which sometimes compete, but mostly complement each other. The first one is the revenge, compensation, rebalancing argument. Trump really believes that this trading system has been structured unfairly. It's been structured to discriminate against us. We are basically paying, other countries have major barriers. We don't. And so they're collecting all our money and we're paying to sustain their unfair trade practices. And these tariffs are a way to rebalance, to restructure, and put the economy back on a fair footing. The second one is it's a way to, and this is where they've been sending mixed signals the last 2 days as we talked about it. It's a tactic, it's not a policy. It's a tactic to force other countries to lower their barriers. So we say we're going to raise ours. We don't just say it, we do it. We raise ours. And that what Trump really expects is they're going to come in and say, well, if you'll put yours back down to where they were, we will actually lower ours. So we'll see. There's been mixed messages on that. Secretary Lutnick and Secretary Bessent at different times have sort of suggested, yeah, that's something that we can talk about. The White House spokespeople yesterday said that wasn't going to happen, that this is about implementation. It's not about negotiation. Trump has said different things at different times. I think the truth probably is, in a sense, what Lutnick said, which is, if somebody calls him, he'll pick up the phone. He's not going to refuse to talk. But what they are now saying is that they don't intend, under any circumstances, to go below 10%. So, so everybody faces, something bigger for the most part. And they've also said that countries that have made sort of preemptive concessions over the last couple weeks, which would be India and Vietnam in particular, they've hinted that doesn't count. You have to come in and maybe we'll have a negotiation and we'll see what happens. But it sounds like if they do that, and I think the president will do that, but it sounds like they're going to drive a hard bargain. So that's the second one. The third one, of course, is revenue. They want to raise money, and then we talked about that before. They want to raise the money because they want to finance the tax cuts, which are going to go mostly to the rich. But the way the congressional rules about this work is if you want to extend the tax cuts, you're going to have to pay for them, and at least in some amount. And this is one way to come up with some money. And the last reason, which I think is which we've already talked about, was one of the main ones, is he really does want to force manufacturing back to the United States. And it's old manufacturing, it's steel, it's aluminum, it's cars. It really is back to the 50s.
Well, I have a question about that. So let's say it does force American manufacturing to, resurrect itself. Aren't the jobs that are going to be there mostly automated?
Well, good point. And that's the dirty little secret of all this. I think most economists would say, and our paper points out, that while you can make the case that a bunch of jobs were lost to Chinese imports between roughly 1999 and 2011, the larger number, and particularly since then, were lost to technology improvements and automation, which has been true for 50 years. If you look at manufacturing output, it continues to go up. We're making more stuff than we ever made, but we are continually making it with fewer workers. So it's not clear how many jobs he's going to end up creating. But also, the other piece of that he doesn't want to talk about is it's not clear that whether we have the workers to fill the jobs anyway. We did a paper on this that came out in October or November last year that didn't look at high-tech engineers and chip design geniuses, but looked at construction, agriculture, transportation, and healthcare, all basic elements of our economy, and discovered, 6-figure plus job shortages in all those sectors. We don't have enough construction workers. We don't have enough truck drivers. We don't have enough healthcare workers. And that's a segment that's going to grow as our population ages. We can't fill those positions, and we're not going to have enough people to fill assembly line positions. In one of the strangest things that I've heard so far is at one point, Secretary Bissett from Treasury said, well, you're talking about all the people that are getting fired from the government, says, well, they can get jobs on the assembly lines that we're going to create.
What assembly lines are there?
Well, first of all, that's several years down the road if it happens at all.
Yeah.
But second of all, so you're going to take, a 55-year-old woman who's been working at the Internal Revenue Service, reviewing tax returns for 20 years at a desk job, and say, okay, now we want you to go off and make steel or cars or even T-shirts. That's not the way the economy works, and that's people, I think, they're not going to be happy when they're told that's the choice they have.
No, not at all. So, Bill, maybe one of the most surprising things today is how intensely the Wall Street Journal's editorial board, which is a conservative editorial board, went after Liberation Day. And a couple things really stood out to me. One, they called this the end of U.S. economic leadership. And two, they also said this is going to create a bigger swamp because the tariffs impose costs that businesses will want to avoid, and they're going to hire lobbyists, and it's going to create a whole bigger industry around swamp type things that the Trump people say they don't like.
Well, that line is already forming. I mean, there's already been stories written about this. The big winners here are trade lawyers.
Yeah.
And trade consultants, and I think that's true. I think the other element of this that deserves comment on is, and this is sort of basic economics. If you protect your economy the way he's doing it, your certain industries the way he's doing it, you don't get more efficient, competitive companies. You get less efficient, less competitive companies because they don't have competition. It's not the path to economic strength, and it's not the path to competitiveness. And what I keep coming back to,
or innovation,
right? It's not the path that you don't have to innovate if you've got a protected market,
right?
And what I keep coming back to is, 95% of the world's consumers are not in the United States; they're somewhere else. We are, as you pointed out earlier, a slow growth economy. 3% is a really good year for us.
Yeah.
More often it's 2%, and it may very well be less.
And again, weren't we just at 3% in the last administration?
At the end, yes. Yeah. But I think not anymore. But if you want to grow, if you're a company and thinking about this, if you want to grow, you have to export. You have to engage internationally.
Right.
And there's been a boatload of research over 30 years, 40 years, that demonstrates that companies that engage internationally, actually, whether they export or import, companies that engage internationally are more profitable, hire more people, pay their workers better, and provide better benefits. And what Trump is doing is basically telling companies, you don't need to do that. What we want you to do is meet the U.S. market. And that's just not a pro-growth strategy.
Bill, obviously, we're going to be talking about this on the Trade Guys,
oh, yes.
on and on and on. But thank you for giving this terrific, quick take today. I know you've been busy all around town doing media hits, giving speeches, so I really appreciate it.
Happy to do it, and we'll see you the next time.
You got it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, check out our larger suite of CSIS podcasts. From Into Africa, The Asia Chessboard, China Power, AIDS 2020, The Trade Guys, Smart Women, Smart Power, and more. You can listen to them all on major streaming platforms like iTunes and Spotify. Visit csis.org/podcasts to see our full catalog.